Hello, good morning.
Hey, hello. We are just getting flickers of sound. There's no
Hello,
continuous
good
sound.
morning.
Hello, hi. We can hear you, but there is no continuous sound from the live stream.
Is there a problem at the end of Zoom or you?
Hey, hello. We are just getting flickers of sound. There's no
Hello,
continuous
good
sound.
morning.
Hello, hi. We can hear you, but there is no continuous sound from the live stream.
Is there a problem at the end of Zoom or you?
Hey, hello. We are just getting flickers of sound. There's no continuous
Hello, good
sound.
morning.
Hello, hi. We can hear you, but there is no continuous sound from the live stream.
Is there a problem at the end of Zoom or you?
Hey, hello. We are just getting flickers of sound. There's no continuous
Hello, good
sound.
morning.
Hello, hi. We can hear.
Ma'am,
Now maybe
please
just try
speak
now.
once.
Yeah, okay. Hello. Hello. Everybody's appearing so serious. Actually, so something like the RJs do. Hello, Lakshmi. Good morning. Hello. Good morning.
Yes.
Is it okay? Can I formally begin to talk formally? No.
Just
I should continue to talk.
Just 1 second.
Just one.
I'll confirm.
Why you say 1 second? I think we're talking rubbish. Yeah, I hope nobody's recording them. Please. I think somebody was. Let me just say that this is an informal thing. We're checking out technologies, so we just want to hear you talk. Do not take this seriously, whoever is listening.
And now it's there on YouTube Live. I can check YouTube Live. It's there.
Is it okay? Should I continue to talk?
Zoom ka, I don't think we've can you ask
What's
colleague?
it doing? It's so easy to do.
Participants, if they're oh, the sound.
Ma'am, we are only able to listen to you people talking and not the stage proceeding.
You can't hear us? Good
I
Lord.
can only hear you guys talking amongst each other, but nothing
yes, so now-
around.
Okay,
mic
okay.
unplug
Can you
kar
hear
lo.
us
Can
now?
you, okay, can you hear me now? Hello, Zoom people.
Yes,
Can
yes, we can hear you, but we cannot hear anything else.
ठीक है,
So,
perfect.
you hear me?
Perfect.
That's what we need to hear.
It is there on.
Shall we begin?
नहीं नहीं
It's,
YouTube
it's
पे
there
है.
now.
आ गया.
It's there.
Technology.
so whoever is handling the laptop will have to stay silent so that we are able to listen to the surrounding noise, voices.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a personal privilege and pleasure to welcome you to the International Seminar on Angarey and the Progressive Writers Movement, organized by the Department of English, Harvard Girls Degree College, and in association with Indian Association of Commonwealth Literature and Language Studies. Let me at the outset welcome our chief guest, Professor M. Asaduddin, Dean Faculty of Humanities and Languages, a professor in the Department of English at the Jamia Millia Islamia University in New Delhi and chairperson of iClass. We also extend a warm welcome to Professor Swati Pal, Principal Janaki Devi Memorial College, University of Delhi, New Delhi, and the Vice Chair of iClass. Professor Nandini Saha of Jadavpur University, Zonal Representative of iClass. Mr. Durojit Sarna, Professor Durojit Sarna, a Zonal Representative of iClass, and Professor Fatima Rizvi, who is the Organizing Secretary of this conference, also the Zonal Representative of iClass. We also have amongst us two very eminent persons, Professor Sukrita Paul, writer, critic, poet, who has held the Aruna Asif Ali Chair at the Delhi University, and Salim Arif, a well-known theatre personality and filmmaker. A very warm welcome to you from the Ahmed Girls Degree College, its management committee, its faculty and students. I just thought that I would say a few words before we hand over the mic for the process to begin. So on the seminar on Angarey and the Progressive Writers Movement, it gives me great pleasure to welcome all the other academicians, participants, and the students. The idea was to revisit and reconstruct an age and movement which began in Lucknow and spread to the farthest corner of the nation. The Progressive Writers Movement heralded an age of not just literary advancement, but also led to a cultural progressivism, which sought to take along the marginalized groups of society and provided a voice and a representation of the subaltern groups of the society. The present is always informed by the past, and though the movement is not in existence today, it continues to exert its influence till date. I hope that the deliberations of this international seminar, which will be held in the areas of society, politics, culture, and Angarey as the precursor of the Progressive Writers Movement, overseas influences, and the AIPWA manifesto, radicalization of literature under the PWM, anti-colonial sentiment, and the progressive writers psychological realism and progressive literature, humanism and progressive literature, modernism and progressive ideals, feminism and progressive ideals in cinema, art and activism, and progressive ideals in literature today would lead to more nuanced understanding of the movement and map its ripples, which continue to fill till date. A very warm welcome to all of you, and we hope that we are going to have a very productive 2 days ahead of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. I request Professor Fatima Rizvi, Organizing Secretary of the seminar, to formally introduce the speakers.
Thank you, Dr. Bhatnagar. A very warm good morning to all of you. Dear friends and colleagues, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning's session, inaugural session, Professor Carlo Coppola, who is one of the most eminent critics and scholars of Urdu Hindi literature. So I read out his bio note for you. Professor Carlo Coppola holds an MA in English and a PhD in comparative literature from the University of Chicago. A specialist in Urdu, Hindi, and Sanskrit literatures, he is co-founder and co-editor of Mehfil, a quarterly of South Asian literature, and editor-in-chief of the Journal of South Asian Literature. He has published scholarly articles, translations, and co-translations of poetry and fiction from several South Asian languages, and interviews with major 20th century South Asian writers, including contributors to Angarey, Ahmad Ali, and Sajjad Zahir. He has published 5 books, most recently, Urdu Poetry, 1935 to 1970, The Progressive Episode, which was brought out by OUP in the year 2017. And Another Life, 13 Stories and a Play, brought out by HarperCollins in the year 2018. English translations of major short stories and a groundbreaking play by Hindi writer Mohan Rakesh. Retiring after 4 decades of teaching at Oakland University, where he is Professor Emeritus of Urdu, Hindi, and Linguistics. He is an instructor of courses on world literature, cultural history of South Asia and the Middle East, the religions of South Asia, and food history at the Osher Lifelong Institute of Learning at the University of California, Los Angeles. He is currently completing work on a collection of interviews with and articles on 31 South Asian writers entitled Speaking of, to, with, and about South Asian writers, interviews and essays. We'd like to welcome you very warmly, Professor Coppola, among us, and we look forward to your keynote address this morning. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce our chairperson for this morning's session, Professor M. Asaduddin, who is author, critic, and translator in several languages and writes on literature, language, politics, and translation studies. Currently, he is the Dean, Faculty of Humanities and Languages at the Jamia Millia Islamia University, New Delhi, and advisor to the Vice Chancellor. He was a Fulbright Scholar in Residence at Rutgers University and a Charles Wallace Trust Fellow at the University of East Anglia. Among his books are The Complete Premchand Stories, brought out by Penguin Random House, which runs into 4 volumes, Premchand in World Languages, brought out by Routledge, Filming Fiction, Tagore, Premchand, and Ray, brought out by Oxford University Press, A Life in Birds, brought out by Penguin, a Penguin book of classic Urdu stories, and Lifting the Veil, Selected Writings of Ismat Chugtai, as also Image and Representation, Stories of Muslim Lives in India, brought out by Oxford University Press. He is the chair, Indian Association for Commonwealth Literature and Language Studies, the ICLALS. He is a Sahit Academy, New Delhi, and Crossword Book Awardee. A warm welcome to you, Professor Asaduddin. Without much ado now, I'd like to hand over the proceedings of the session to you. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Anyone?
can hear you.
Professor Nishi Pandey, Professor Bina Rai, Professor Swati Pal, Professor Fatima Rizvi, friends and dignitaries, members of IACLALS, students of our degree college and Lucknow University, and other members of the audience. A very good morning to you on this very sunny morning in Lucknow. Moving away from the convention, I'd like to begin by complimenting this city and saying something about this city itself, which will also include the beautiful people who live here. One wonders what is there in the water and air, Abu Hawa of this city, that it produces these wonderful luminaries about a century ago, who went on to produce this work that is known as Angarey. What is there in this city again that commemorates one of its founding luminaries, Ahmad Ali, a couple of years ago, again in this city, under the aegis of IACLALS and the scholars of Lucknow, when Ahmad Ali's entire family came over here and tried to recreate those moments. Again, in 2015, if I remember correctly, English department, Lucknow University, held a wonderful conference on Ismat Chughtai, who is the second generation, who received the influences so profoundly, which she records in her books, particularly in her autobiography, Kaghazi Hai Pairan. If I had time, I would have liked to read some parts from it, which is so evocative of the electric atmosphere that was created after the publication of that book. So over the years, personally, it has become a favorite place for me because whenever you remember a city, you remember its people. So whenever I remember Lucknow, I remember Lucknow University, I remember Professor Nishi Pandey, Fatima Rizvi, Meenakshi Bawa, and a lot of other people who of course are made by the culture of this city, but at the same time, they are also contributing their own bit to the perhaps continuance and persistence and development of that culture, where so many other forces are trying to erode that culture. Coming to Angarey itself, because I want the keynote to begin as early as possible, we must remember that a work of literature is not only valued for its artistic, aesthetic, or literary merit. At the distance of a century or half a century, we look back at it and try to assess it in terms of the impact it had created over the last 50 years or a century. And in that respect, it goes without saying that Angarey's impact has been phenomenal, not only in Urdu Hindi literature, but quite a few literatures of India, with my modest acquaintance with Bangla or Odia literature or Malayalam literature, particularly Bengali literature, where this trend still continues, making the publication of a continuous stream of writing, publication of the stream of journals, publication of new ways of playwriting, still continuing. From my acquaintance, I can remember just another instance of this kind from Bengali literature. When the poem Bidruhi or the Rebel was written by Qazi Nazrul Islam, it had the similar Bengal. And a century of this poem, it was published in 1921. A century of that poem is being now celebrated in India, in Bangladesh, and in wherever the Bengali diaspora is. So we have gathered here not only to look at the literary pieces that were put together in that volume called Angarey, but trying to look back at the impact it had created. I mentioned Ismat Chugtai a little while ago, and because this is a girls' degree college. A century ago in 1930s or 1940s, today all the girls here, you take your education or entering a university or college for granted. But it was such an enormous struggle for the women, just let us say 90 years ago or 100 years ago. Struggle with the family, with the society to enter the portal of the school or the portal of the college. And then when they had entered those schools, girls' schools and girls' colleges, trying to make the most of the opportunities they have got. I'd like to conclude again with the allusion to Ismat Chughtai's description of the impact it had made on her when she read this Angarey. Not openly, because secretly it was being circulated among the girls of Aligarh Girls' School, which was newly established, and Ismat Chugtai herself, she had waged a valiant struggle with her own family to enter the school. And you can imagine the way she writes, that it was nothing short of a physical, a mental, a spiritual, a psychological liberation for her and that generation of young women at that point of time to go through these stories. I wish all of you, all the delegates of YACLAS and others who have come to attend this conference, a very fruitful discussion spread throughout the sessions, and a generally pleasant stay here. And I have no doubt all of us, when we go back, every time we go back much enriched from Lucknow. Thank you very much.
Professor Carlo Coppola, could you please give your keynote address? I mean, could you? Yeah.
If Professor Coppola is hearing us, I'd request Professor Coppola to deliver his keynote address.
Professor Coppola, you can unmute and talk.
He's unmuted already. Okay, yeah, you can speak.
Professor Coppola, can you hear us?
I don't think he can hear us, isn't it? That is why he's not responding.
Could you go and check whether the audio is still there?
He's not hearing us.
Professor Coppola, can you hear anything at all?
I'm putting a message. I'm
We are
doing that.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we
I
can hear
cannot
you.
hear anyone.
We can hear you.
Write that, we can hear you. We can hear you.
I'm having a problem here. Can you hear me?
I am doing that.
We are constantly messaging.
Can you talk from here?
Yes, yes, you can.
Reading the message.
I think somebody will have to call him and tell him that we can hear him because he's screen sharing. He cannot see the chat box, I believe.
Just
Does anybody have his number?
can speak.
Professor Coppola, we can hear you. Please begin your speech.
Oh dear.
Professor Coppola, can you hear us? Is it possible to call him?
Can anyone hear me? I can't hear anyone.
Say yes, we can.
We can hear you.
You have to type it in.
Yeah.
We have been writing in
Maybe he's not even a message.
Could you please call him?
If you can hear me, then I will proceed.
Say yes, right? Yes.
Thank you, Professor Rizvi, for your kind introduction, and good morning, everyone in the beautiful historical city of Lucknow, wherever else in the world any of the participants may be. It's a day earlier here, December 15th. We're 13 and a half hours later than you are, so it's evening here in Los Angeles. And I hope our connection will be steady and that my two dogs will behave themselves as promised and not interfere with our proceedings with their remarks. Am I coming through loud and clear? I'm not hearing anything. Someone maybe send me a note. Yes, great. It's my honor to be addressing you at this important seminar hosted by the Department of English of Awadh Girls Degree College and in association with the Indian Association of Commonwealth Literature and Language Studies. First, I wish to express some special thanks to the patron of this seminar, Ms. Zareen Vikaji, president of Awadh Girls Degree College, to Professor Nishi Pandey, and to the co-convener, Professor Beena Rai. Each of you is indebted, we are indebted to each of you for making this seminar possible. How did I get here is a question I'm usually asked by new South Asian friends, and virtually every one of the 32 South Asian writers I have interviewed, either in person or via email during my association with the journals Mehfil, a quarterly magazine of South Asian literature published from the University of Chicago, and the Journal of South Asian Literature published from Michigan State University. How did I come to make South Asian literature the focal point of my academic life? It's a very good question, and I'll take this occasion to tell it. Bear with me. It was, in fact, the result of a prank. As simple as that, truly. At the time, it was unexpected. but much later I came to the realization that this seemingly trifle event was in fact life-changing, transformative, and gratifying. It was back in the day when dinosaurs roamed the earth, spring term 1962 to be exact. I was completing my MA degree in English at the University of Chicago and had just been awarded a 3-year teaching fellowship at the University of Oregon on the west coast of the United States in its new innovative comparative literature program. I had rather vague ideas about my dissertation, which would involve 3 languages. First, Italian, my first language. Second, French, part of my undergraduate double major of English and French, and of course, English. The topic of investigation, connections, very vague, real or imagined, between and among Renaissance drama or poetry and English, French, and Italian. Late in the afternoon of that spring day, a friend dropped by for a visit. He had lived next door to me in the dormitory or the hostel for 2 years in our undergraduate university in Cleveland, Ohio, where he was widely known to be a prankster. And he was very appropriately going to law school to be a lawyer. He said, "I signed your name on a postcard in the post office yesterday," he said with his jokester smile. "On a what?" I replied. "A postcard advertising that new thing President Kennedy just started, that Peace Corps or whatever else it was." "Tom," I replied, "you're crazy. Why did you even waste the energy to do that?" I dismissed what he said and we moved on to a more important matter: where to go for dinner. Italian, Chinese, or burgers and beer at Jimmy's Bar, where we might even see the novelist Saul Bellow having a drink on his way home, which he frequently did. Fast forward 2 months later, I received a telegram from Washington, D.C. from R. Sargent Shriver, President John F. Kennedy's brother-in-law, who was in charge of the Peace Corps. He thanked me for my interest in the newly established Peace Corps, if he only knew. And would I be interested in possibly going to a place called Pakistan? Actually, I pronounced it Pakistan then in my upper Midwest American language, a country I'd never heard of before, and I was to teach English there. The application for the program would arrive special delivery the next day, Mr. Shriver's telegram said. Later that evening, I rushed to an encyclopedia and read the entry on Pakistan, a country in 2 widely separated parts, originally part of the British colonial empire, and with a long list of languages spoken there, and what struck me as strange languages with strange names: Baluchi, Hindi, Kashmiri, Punjabi, Saraiki, and the one at the bottom of the list was spelled U-R-D-U. I didn't even venture a guess as to how to pronounce it. I was impressed, though, that it had millions of speakers, and together with Hindi, it was probably the 3rd most widely spoken language on the planet. That impressed me a great deal. But this was my dilemma, the PhD or the Peace Corps. I mulled over it for a couple of days, talked to several friends who had encouraged me to take advantage of this truly unique opportunity. John F. Kennedy's famous statement in his inaugural address, quote, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." That played over and over again in my head. And other friends pointed out that I was a bit of a, quote, stuffed shirt. They said, loosen up. They said, take advantage of this adventure. I vacillated, I hemmed and hawed, I seesawed, I was very indecisive. And I told myself it would be very unlike me to do such a thing. It was rather radical. But in the end, I decided I'm not a stuffed shirt, go for it. And I did. I sent a telegram to the University of Oregon telling them of my change of plans. They were not pleased, for it rather disrupted their fall teaching schedule. I wrote them a letter of apology later. I filled out the extensive application, including medical history and names of teachers, friends, and neighbors in my hometown who could be contacted for information about me. And this information would be turned over to Mr. Shriver, special delivery. I was accepted for the first phase of the Peace Corps training in September of 1962, an intense 6 weeks program at Colorado State University. It was the start of what I would eventually call my, quote, passage to India, to borrow the title from Forster's famous novel, a radical evaluation of what I came to realize was my limited worldview and narrow historical, political, social, and even religious thinking. There were 23 of us, roughly half women, mostly nurses, men, engineers, Army veterans, construction workers, mechanics, and various other technical types of different ages and from different parts of the country. There were even a newly married farm couple and 2 English majors, of which, of course, I was one. Most were white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, WASPs, but there were also several African Americans and Asian Americans and one Italian American. We were put on a rather rigid schedule of classes throughout the various, taught to us by various professors from Colorado State University and other specialists brought in from American universities who lectured on Pakistan's history, politics, society, government, non-American football, or soccer as we call it over here, the major tenets of Islam, and the Urdu language, which I easily learned to pronounce, even with the rolled R. It was taught by a charismatic South Asian, a recently minted Harvard PhD in linguistics, who loved Urdu poetry. And by the 3rd week, he had us memorizing shares from Muhammad Iqbal. We were introduced to Pakistani food, how to properly eat with 3 fingers of our right hand if necessary. The women learned how to fold a sari. The men learned how not to offer to shake hands with a woman unless she offered first, what a lota was and how to use it, and the dizzyingly array of names for family memberships. We also met a number of Pakistani Air Force officers who were receiving technical training of some sort at the university in the School of Engineering, along with a variety of Pakistani officials from the embassy who would visit periodically. We also learned that back home, men were interviewing people in our neighborhoods and schools about us. How did we get along with other people? How were we received by our teachers? What kind of friends did we have? Were any of them strange? Were any of them different? These questions were being carried out by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. In sum, this was one of the most exciting experiences of my life. Learning about my complete ignorance of almost everything outside of the Eurocentric bubble in which I had been educated thus far. And the sense of camaraderie and esprit de corps within the group was unique, given its diversity in backgrounds, diversity in ages, temperaments, and education. Helpful in encouraging one another in each way possible, we were all replying to President Kennedy's ask what we could do for our country. During the last 2 weeks of this 6 weeks course, everyone was excited about moving on to phase 2 of the program, Jungle Training Camp, as it was called, for 2 weeks in Puerto Rico. Our medical records were being carefully checked. Medical shots were being updated or were being administered for the first time. I was called in by the attending physician and asked about my subclinical, that is mild case of hepatitis I suffered from a year ago while in Chicago. How did I contract it? Simple enough. My girlfriend's roommate at the time was hospitalized with a full-blown case of it. My girlfriend was a carrier, and I contracted it from her and was confined to bed for 6 weeks, missing almost the entire 10-week quarter term of classes, which I was then later allowed to complete. Well, the doctor said, I have some bad news for you. He told me that I would not be able to take the required shot of the anti-malarial drug chloroquine. Now, you may all remember this, the very drug that was so clownishly and foolishly endorsed by Donald Trump during the early days of the world COVID pandemic as a cure. This chloroquine was required for both Puerto Rico and for Pakistan, and for diplomats and their families, American diplomats and families in different parts of the country where there was a prevalence of malaria. If I took such a shot, it would destroy my liver. On hearing this news, several of the nurses who had had contact with this drug and its effects offered extreme sincere sympathy for the bad news, but said that the doctor was absolutely right. It could kill me. Thus, I was deselected, some very technical term you understand, from the program for medical reasons. In fact, 2 others were also deselected, but for different reasons. One was a brave nurse who had boldly confronted and publicly embarrassed a visiting Pakistani diplomat about the embassy's pressure to fire the Urdu teacher, Dr. Ved Prakash Batuk, because according to rumors, and we think these were spread by these Air Force officers, he was in fact not teaching us Urdu, but Hindi, despite our shares of Iqbal. Vedji had been born in an area of the Punjab that became part of Pakistan, from which his parents fled in 1948 for India. Moreover, he was also a Hindu, very lapsed by his own admission. And as I said before, we suspected the rumors were started by these officers. They would drop in casually in our classes, perhaps checking up on us and what was being said. This turned into a very touchy issue and could have ended up canceling the entire program. And this was my first acquaintance and run-in with what is the animosity between India and Pakistan. The other deselectee was a gregarious, popular giant of a construction worker from the state of Oregon, who had specialized in dam construction. It was reported that he had dressed as a woman at a Halloween party the previous year. The prejudicial implications were obvious. Washington was not taking chances of any sort, given the unfortunate international furor a year earlier, that is in 1961, caused by a Peace Corps volunteer who wrote a very disparaging postcard about the, quote, primitive living conditions, unquote, there. And it was found or somehow purloined on the campus of the university where she was teaching English. But I was devastated. My big question was, what do I do now? Both Vedji quickly stepped in and offered a solution because I was adept at the language of those in the group, and given my literary and linguistic background and intellectual interests, he would immediately contact the director of the newly established South Asian Studies Center at, incidentally, the University of Chicago. That would be nice. I loved being there. Vedji had in fact been hired to teach Hindi and Urdu there, but he then declined to teach the Peace Corps training position instead, as a, quote, gesture of gratitude and respect for the United States of America, unquote. A fact which added grim irony to the attempt to fire him. All good deeds shall go unpunished, right? Shall be punished. Sorry, Oscar Wilde, I misquoted you. He arranged for me to meet various people in Chicago on my return from Colorado, and based on his telephone recommendation, I was invited to apply to the center and was eventually offered a full fellowship, tuition, living expenses, books, etc., starting in January 1962. I had in fact lost a semester, one term of study in this adventure. For the next 6 months, 6 years rather, including summers, I received generous US government fellowships because Urdu and its counterpart Hindi were considered, quote, critical to the safety and well-being of the United States according to the National Defense Education Act of 1958, clearly a result of the Soviets' success with Sputnik, which led American leaders to believe that the US was falling behind the Soviet Union in the ongoing Cold War. I took every course dealing with South Asian and Middle Eastern studies offered at the university, taught by some of Chicago's foremost scholars and other scholars, mostly from the UK, in the fields of history, political science, sociology, anthropology, geography, art, music, film. I also studied Persian, a lot of Sanskrit, and for a minute, Turkish. I couldn't handle 4 languages at the time, so I dropped the Turkish. I was also studying theoretical linguistics when Noam Chomsky, the not yet famous anti-war activist, and transformational grammar were all the rage. And I even joined in on the early Sunday morning football, that is soccer matches, on the midway at the university. My Urdu teacher was Muhammad Hussein Kabir Qureshi, a Bollywood handsome young man just a few years older than myself. He had been a peripheral member of the Bollywood film set. In fact, he was to be an actor, but he didn't do well on his screen test, I understand. And he was a personal friend of one of the major film lyricists and progressive, that is leftist Marxist poets, Sahir Ludhianvi, whose film lyrics featured not only themes of love and passion, but also themes of social and economic justice. We started to translate some of these and some of his longer socio-political poems, along with works by the innovative modernist Noon Mim Rashid. It was from Kabir Sahab that I first heard of Angarey, which he vaguely described as a highly controversial, anti-religious, anti-British anthology of short stories written by a group of 4 young writers, 3 young men, they're all in their 20s, and a very staunchly liberated woman doctor. This was the early 1930s. It caused riots, book burnings, and all sorts of socio-religious and political mayhem. No, he had not read it, and no, we could not get a copy of it because it had been burned, and all copies were allegedly destroyed. The remaining copies were destroyed by British authorities. Kabir Sahab's teaching contract was not renewed, and a new instructor of Urdu from the very liberal leftist University of California, Berkeley, was hired, Chaudhry Muhammad Naeem. He was a dazzlingly brilliant, no-nonsense taskmaster. All of us, about a dozen or so, were at different levels of instruction with him, and we commiserated with one another about the vigor and challenge of his teaching. Finally, the acknowledged best student in our group, who had just spent 2 years in Allahabad learning how to play the sitar, came up with the perfect term to describe the Naeem method: Urdu with tears. In 1963, Naeem Sahab asked me, I had been the assistant editor and then the editor of my undergraduate university's literary magazine, to join him in bringing out a journal of English translation of South Asian literature. This is the Mehfil. A group of us, including my new wife, who had been a corporate English-Spanish bilingual secretary, produced on mimeograph, that is cyclostyle machine, volume 1, number 1 of Mehfil. 29 pages long, printed on one side, on sale in the university bookstore for 75 cents, or about 4 rupees in 1962 Indian rupee value. It was a rather kacha looking thing, but its contents we certainly thought were excellent. And we quickly learned that to think that we could bring out a magazine 4 times a year was, well, simply stupid. Submissions were slow to arrive and subscriptions even slower. So we realized that we would be very lucky if we would be able to bring out 2 or even 1 issue a year. I read Sajjad Zahir's Roshanai, Light, 1959, his firsthand account of the development of the progressive movement based on his memory written during his imprisonment in Pakistan for participation in the infamous Rawalpindi conspiracy case. In it, it was alleged that leftist elements in the Pakistan army and prominent communists in Pakistan's political classes, including Zahir and the poet Faiz Ahmad Faiz, were plotting to overthrow the current government and to deliver Pakistan to the Soviet Union's sphere of influence. Zahir mentions Angarey only once there. When I interviewed him and his wife, Razia Sahiba, at their New Delhi home on the 20th of January, 1968, from 2 to 3:30 p.m., I was allowed not to tape it. I asked him 2 questions of the 10 that were allowed about Angarey. First, did he have a copy of it that I might see? Answer, no, he didn't. Nor did he know anyone who had. Moreover, it was unlikely that I wouldn't find anyone with one because all copies of the 200 or so published at his expense, as he pointed out, had been confiscated by the British authorities and destroyed, possibly except for a few copies saved in the official police files in London. Second question, why didn't he spend more time discussing Angarey in Roshanai and his other writings, given its seminal importance, a major inflection point in the development of the progressive movement over which he had such a powerful influence? Answer, quote, because it would not have served any meaningful purpose. Next question, unquote. One could interpret these rather dismissive, vague responses in any number of ways. Incidentally, I'd also like to call to your attention the newly established exhaustive Sajjad Zahir virtual archive launched in April last year by the South Asian Studies Center at the University of Texas, Austin, under the leadership of the indefatigable Dr. Akbar Haider. A very important site for a very important, complex political literary figure in South Asian history. So it seemed I was fated to write a dissertation without actually reading Angarey. How would that be possible? It simply wasn't. And it stymied my completion of the dissertation until 1975. But another more enterprising, more thoughtful, more intelligent young American scholar did not accept this situation as a defeat. In 1973, this American scholar, researching for his PhD in Urdu and Hindi women writers at Aligarh Muslim University, set out to get a copy of Angarey for certain. Through various personal channels, he was able to contact the Khatib, Mirza Khan, who wrote Angarey and other writings for both Dr. Rashid Jahan and Mahmoud Zafar Khan, contributors to Angarey. Mirza Khan Sahab was then living in Lucknow and secretly owned his personal copy of the book. It was carefully and surreptitiously arranged that he would spirit it to Aligarh via train, where it would be passed on to this young scholar who, through other elaborate and entangled connections, arranged to photograph it at night on a state-of-the-art microfilm camera in the darkened office of one of the academic departments at Aligarh Muslim University. The windows to the office were covered over with blankets, so no flashing lights from the camera would be seen. The scholar started photographing the text, but about a third of the way through, he started having problems with his vision and nearly passed out. He had to stop photographing, and after removing the blankets from the windows, he returned to his room into the hostel with the film. The next day, he conferred with the physician about his near fainting. The physician determined that working with the camera in a darkened room, he probably strained his eyes, depleting them of potassium, which caused the problem. The scholar was told to eat bananas. Determined to complete the project, he loaded up on bananas the next day as prescribed by the doctor and successfully completed the photographing of the text that second night, surreptitiously returning the copy to the Khatib, who then early the next morning quickly took the first train from Aligarh to Lucknow. The film was sent to Kodak in Bombay, where it was developed, and as they say, the rest is, well, history. This scholar generously shared his treasure with those of us whose dissertations and writings were held up by having no copy before. And this was the original unredacted text of Angarey. Despite its early continued prohibition, early attempts to republish the text in both Urdu and Hindi resulted in extensive redactions. Words or phrases were not blackened out as one would ordinarily think of redaction. We see this a whole lot on television where blank pages, well, not blackened out pages of various important news items are blackened out to keep people wondering. Here, though, redaction was essentially changing religiously or politically highly charged words and phrases throughout the text. They were changed to more temperate ones, thus changing the tenor, nuance, and impact of the original. For example, holy book would be substituted for Quran in the text. Alamiya would be substituted for Allah as well. It reminded me of reading Baudelaire's Shakespeare texts. Despite its continued official prohibition, Angarey has been published in various redact forms in both Urdu and Hindi, and has been translated into English twice in 2014. Angarey by Snehal Shinghvi and Angarey, 9 Stories and a Play, translated by Biba Chauhan and Khalid Alvi, with a foreword by film actress and director Nadira Zahir Babar, daughter of Sajjad Zahir and Razia Sajjad Zahir. There has not been any appreciable political or religious backlash that I'm aware of, and reviews have discussed each of the translation's good points and the not so good points. But we in the South Asian literary community should all be grateful for both. And it is hoped that at some time in the future, the fully unexpurgated Urdu text of the original will appear. I made a copy of my copy of the text for my distinguished scholar and poet colleague, Dr. Munibur Rahman, the late Dr. Munibur Rahman, who had joined the Department of Modern Languages and Literature at my Oakland University in 1970. We read and discussed the text together, for he, of course, had not read it before. Of the 10 pieces in Angarey, I was, on the first reading, especially struck by the first 2 of Sajjad Zahir's 5 stories therein. Neend Nahi Aati, Sleep Does Not Come, and Jannat Ki Basharat, Vision of Paradise. These are the first 2 selections in the text. With the former, I was frankly shocked, dumbfounded, as I read the stream of consciousness rantings and diatribes of the misogynist poet protagonist Akbar, who says, "Oh God, why did you create woman? How can a poor, weak person bear the burden of this trust on his shoulders? And I know what will happen on Judgment Day. These same women will create turmoil there too, will show such flirtiness, and will wink in such a way that poor Allah himself will start to scratch his beard." This is a translation that Munib Sahab and I published in 1981, which, as far as I'm able to tell, is one of the first translations from the original text, from the photographs that were saved for all of us to have. I noticed too that these translations have been used by a number of scholars who are presenting paper at this very conference, which is good. In Shinghvi's translation of the story called Can't Sleep, the passage was, "God, why did you create woman after all? A poor, weak, man like me cannot shoulder the burden of your gift. And I know what will happen on Judgment Day. These same women will scream and squeal, then just like they do now, and they will flirt and they will wink and wink, so much so that even poor God will stroke his beard in arousal. It is notable the word arousal is not in the text and is a free translation of what is implied in the text. And this is a significant feature of Shingavi's translation, which I feel is very quick moving and very colloquial, but there are problems in it as well as the other one as well. In their version of this story called Insomnia, Johan and Alvi translate the passage as Aye Huda, why did you create woman? It is not possible for a feeble, pathetic man like me to handle this liability, to keep her in custody. And I will know very well exactly what will happen on the day of judgment. These women will shriek and screech. They will put on such an enticing set of airs and wink at even Allah Mia, who will scratch his beard, wondering how to deal with them. Here, one of the features of this translation is the use of Urdu words in the text, which brings it closer to the original. And the Urdu words are easily recognizable. I similarly reacted similarly to the ending of Jannat Ki Basharat, cited by various scholars, translators, and critics as the most gratuitously blasphemous, puerile piece in all of Angarey. How am I doing on time here? Am I running over? I have till excuse me a minute here. I want to I have not till 9:55 my time. Okay. I have a little time yet. Okay. Jannat Ki Basharat. Puerile, blasphemous. It is set during the solemn night of power, Layat al-Qadr, on the 27th night of Ramadan. The protagonist, the rather insipid, late middle-aged Maulana Dawood, who, having attended several aftars, goes home to pray. Unable to find his matchbox to light his study, he awakens his young sleeping wife, asking her where it is. She mistakes this for his desire to have sex and then tries to pull him to her. He quickly dismisses her and goes to his study and falls asleep while praying and has a dream of entering heaven. Again, we are given an elaborate stream of consciousness descriptions of the marvels of this place, especially the Huris. Munib Sahab and I translated this last paragraph of Vision of Paradise as, quote, finally, the Maulana's heart was stolen by the charming ways of one of the Huris. Leaping instantly, he entered her chamber and spontaneously clasped her to his arms. But their lips had hardly touched when the sound of laughter came from behind. The Maulana's annoyance with his importunate, I've never used that word before, importunate laughter was limited. He woke up. The sun had risen. Maulana was lying on his stomach on the prayer rug, clasping the glorious Quran, and his wife was standing by his side, laughing. Shingavi's translation, a vision of heaven. Eventually, the Maulana turned to an angel whose coy manner delighted him completely. He leaped forward and entered the part of the room where she stood. He held her to his chest with abandon, and just as they were about to kiss, he heard the sound of wicked laughter behind him. That untimely laughter infuriated the Maulana. He woke up from his dream. The sun had risen. The Maulana had been lying prone on the prayer mat, clutching the Quran to his chest. His wife was standing by his side and laughing. Johan and Alve's translation, and this is the last one I'll read. heaven assured, they call it. The Molana finally bowled over by the coquetry of one of the houris. He skipped quickly into her closet and tightly embraced the divine creature. Their lips were still to be sealed together when loud laughter broke out behind him. Just as a wave of anger washed over the Molana at this most ill-timed laughter, his dream broke and his eyes opened. The sun had risen. The Molana was lying on his stomach on the Jama Namaz, hugging the Holy Quran to his chest. His wife was standing close by, laughing. It is very clear what is implied here. It is not specifically stated, perhaps except for the most sexually naive or repressed reader. I feel it inappropriate for me to name it, especially at a girls' college. Call me a prude. But if you wish to know specifically what is implied and what makes this such an outrageous story, I would be glad to have you email me, coppola@oakland.edu, coppola@oakland.edu, and I'll tell you, but I won't say it here. And again, I say, I think it inappropriate. Now, I have to say too that I wish that I had read this story, in fact, all of them, before I interviewed Sajjad Zahir back in 1968. I think he was lucky because I would have had a lot of question about it. I recall Munib Sahab's calm reaction to my shocked reaction, a slow nod of his head and an enigmatic smile that seemed to suggest, teasingly, ironically, quote, some serious agnostic you are, unquote. Our translation is very likely the first English translation of this story based on the original unredacted text. Incidentally, Munib Sahab just passed away this November 28th in Charleston, West Virginia, where he had been living with his eldest son. He was 98 years old. We, that is my wife and 2 children, and I lived with the Rahmans in Aligarh for about 6 weeks in 1967-68 while we were waiting for a place of our own. Our daughters were the same age and have been lifelong friends. His youngest son and my son were high school and college classmates, working part-time together as accomplished cooks in a very fine Italian restaurant in Rochester, Michigan, near the university. Munib Sahab was given a simple Muslim funeral and was buried in Ann Arbor next to his wife, Zeba Rahman. Let me conclude my remarks with a few suggestions as to avenues of inquiry how you younger scholars might pursue in English related to the Angarey Quartet. 1, a critical edition of Angarey itself, based on a comparative study of the microfilm version of the text with one of the alleged texts in the police files in the UK, along with commentary and analysis. 2, investigation into both Dadaism and Surrealism in this text and in Urdu literature generally, and translations of these works into English. I would suggest the works of satirist Yagana Changezi and people of that ilk. This would be a very interesting avenue to take. Also, critical biographies of the 4 writers based on up-to-date critical theory. Mahmoud Zafar's does not warrant an individual biography. It could be combined with that of Rashid Jahan. And 4, if you dare, a more intimate look at a number of things. For example, the personal interconnections between and among the Angarey authors and their members of their other immediate circles. For example, Sajjad Zahir's failed romantic relationship with Rashid Jahan, possibly caused by the staunch refusal of his very orthodox, very powerful Shia mother to accept a Sunni daughter-in-law. Members of Zahir's London-based Marxist study group, in which there were very prominent people, including the Communist Party leaders Hajra Mumtazullah Khan Begum, Hajra Begum, and Z.A. Ahmad, both serving in very prominent positions as members of the upper parliament in India. One could also look into Zahir's relationship with the famous British radio broadcaster Olive Shapley, his model for Sheila Green in the novella London Ki Ek Raat. The relationship too between Mahmud Muzaffar Khan and his cousins, the sisters Hajra Begum and Zohra Mumtazullah Khan Begum, Zora Sagal. Zora and he were in fact betrothed as children, which added a complication to the relationships that Mahmud Muzaffar had with Hajra Begum. And then I would really like to see someone undertake a study of Dr. M.D. Taseer, very interesting contributor to the early period of the progressive movement in London. He has written a PhD dissertation, supposedly the first one submitted by a university, British university. I'd like to see it reprinted and a study of his work, both as a poet and various other aspects. And finally, a final suggestion, and I'm coming up to my time. I offer a suggestion to have serious efforts put forth to study and translate into English the poetry of the late Dr. Munibur Rahman. He is a poet of subtle, understated yet powerful lyric verse, and he is the vital link connecting late 20th century Urdu modernist poetry to that of the 21st century. And with that, I will end my remarks. Again, profound thanks to all of you who have given me your kind attention, and to each and every individual who so quickly and professionally arranged this important occasion to celebrate Angarey in Urdu literature. It has been my honor to participate. Shukriya, Dhanyavad, Shukran, Merci, and Shabba Khair. Thank you.
We are very grateful. We are sorry that
Thank you, Professor Coppola, for what a riveting keynote. Just 1 minute, if we can split it into 3 parts.
Now, strangely, I cannot hear anyone.
The first section was about academic sleuthing, what kind of espionage work had gone into tracking down the original copy of Angarey, which should be salutary for the research scholars today, because you want to get everything on your cell phone, all your research materials ready-made to you. The edition still generally accessible, the Urdu edition, is by Khalid Alvi, who has edited it, bringing the microfilm from the British Library. But even when you go through his editorial section, you find that he is also not totally uninhibited, because some of the words are missing. He has exercised his editorial license or whatever. So one would like to have absolutely original version.
Professor Talat Ahmed, I look forward to your presentation later in your day there. It will be at midnight here. I will be up here listening. Thank you.
The second part was about a comparative analysis of the 2 generally available English translations, one by Snehal Shangri of the University of Texas in Austin, and the other by Khalid Alvi and Biba Johar. Finally, both of them coming out in 2015, and both of them claiming to be the first English translation but at least you have two translations to compare with one another. And the third section, perhaps the most valuable to the younger scholars, he has given you some new direction towards which you can do your research. So all in all,
I understand there are 3 minutes
now.
remaining in the time I'm allotted. If there are any quick questions that anyone would like to ask, I would be trying to answer them. Or it.
It would open
given
new
the time.
areas of research for you. I'm sorry for this cross purpose. Cross purpose. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I now request Professor Nishi Pandey to read out the message sent by our patron, Ms. Zareen Vikaji.
The patron of the conference and the president of the managing committee of our Girls Degree College, Ms. Zareen Vikaji, could not be with us because of some issues at home, which were really of a serious nature. She has, however, requested that we should read out a message to the delegates and to those present. It is a matter of great pride and pleasure for our Girls Degree College to host this prestigious international seminar on a topic so close to the liberal heart
I would be
of
pleased
men
to
and women in literature.
receive any
In an
queries
age
by email.
when they are able to
Thank you.
express themselves and their views, unlike in days of yore when Angarey was born. We take our freedom personally, professionally, and in literary publications so much for granted. We tend to forget the struggles our forebears suffered for it. I congratulate Professor Fatma Rizvi for this great initiative and all the professors involved in bringing it to fruition. I also take this opportunity to welcome and thank all
Thank
participants
you.
for their contributions in the seminar. It is an honor to host Professor Carlo Coppola as our esteemed keynote speaker, Dr. Talat Ahmed to give the plenary lecture, the plenary address, and Professor Sukrita Paul Kumar for the valedictory address. I welcome all delegates and guests. I also wish to congratulate all who have contributed to make this event a success. Zareen Vikaji, patron and president of our Girls Degree College, Lucknow.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I would request our principal, Professor Veena Rai, the co-convener, to propose a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ali. A very good morning, everyone. I stand here to propose a formal vote of thanks as a co-convener and the principal of the co-convener of the seminar and principal of the college. I would like to state in the very beginning that my gratitude towards each one of you cannot be expressed in words. Having said that, let me begin by extending my deep gratitude to Ms. Zareen Vikaji, the patron of the seminar and the president of the managing committee of the college, who is very much present with us through the encouragement and motivation. She has guided us to aim for the sky and make the most of our capabilities. My sincere thanks to Professor Ann Asudin, chairperson of the high class and the chief guest of the inaugural session, to have graciously accepted the proposal and given his content to host the seminar at our college. My heartfelt gratitude to the keynote speaker of the session, Professor Carlo Coppola, Professor Emeritus of Hindi Urdu, Auckland University, who joined us virtually to deliver his address. Thank you, sir, for your nuanced insight and erudite observations. I would also like to thank Professor Swati Paul, Vice Chair of the members of the Executive Committee of ICLAS, who have joined us today. I hope you enjoy your stay in the city. As convener of the seminar and the secretary manager of the college, Professor Nishi is a name in academic circle that need no introduction. We are indeed blessed to have such a
emulate and to steer us towards the right direction, not just in principle, but also in practice. The inspiration behind the seminar and the person behind its successful organization is Professor Fatima Rafi, Organizing Secretary, who have invested her time and possibility. Professor Ranjana Krishna, with her team of faculty members and the students of the Department of English, has worked tirelessly to ensure the smooth execution of the seminar. They are a part of the college, and so more than expressing gratitude, I would like to congratulate them on the success of the events. My gratitude to the managing committee members, Dr. Noor Khan ma'am, Professor Nakshi Pava ma'am, and other members of the committee, principals of the various university and college, faculty and students of the Department of English, Lucknow University and various colleges, delegates from the various parts of the country. I'm really thankful to you all to present here. I would like to thank the members of the faculty of the college who are serving on various organizational committees and the students of the college who under the guidance of the Students' Council have contributed in various capacities to help organizing the seminar. My sincere thanks I would also like to thank the office staff, technicians, the support staff, and everyone who has with the best intention be involved in marking the seminar in seminar. And last but not the least, dear my dear students, Angarey, जैसा कि हमारे चेयरपर्सन ने भी कहा, इसमत चुगताई बड़ी मुश्किलों से उन्होंने अपनी एजुकेशन कंप्लीट की। आपको वो आज अपॉर्चुनिटी मिली है, वो अवसर मिला है कि आप अपनी शिक्षा पूरी कर सके। आज का दिन भी मत भूलिएगा, एक बार अपने पृष्ठभूमि में जाइएगा। 16 दिसंबर कुछ याद, किसी के जीवन में वो दिन ना आया, लेकिन आज के दिन आप अपने दिल में, अपने सीने में, मैं दुष्यंत कुमार को भी प्रोग्रेसिव पोएट के रूप में मानती हूँ, जिन्होंने कहा था, मेरे सीने में ना तो सही, तेरे सीने में ही सही, आग कहीं भी हो, आग जलनी चाहिए। वो आग आप स्टूडेंट को लिए है, अंगारी को आज आप अपने दिल और दिमाग में बिठा के लेके जाएंगे कि हमें अपनी जिंदगी को आग की तरह जलाना है, कुछ अच्छा पाने के लिए, कुछ अच्छा करने के लिए, इस समाज को बदलने के लिए। आप सभी का एक बार फिर इस मंच से धन्यवाद, और मुझे इस बात की खुशी है कि आज मैं इसका हिस्सा हूँ। थैंक यू मैम।
Thank you so much, ma'am. With this, we come to the end of the inaugural session. Let us now rise for the national anthem.
It's 2 minutes now.
पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाए तब जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता